Good evening, everyone. I want to welcome you to our graduation dinner and get the program on the road. As you know, we've elected a class speaker for GMP 25, so I'm going to turn the floor. It's Ali. Come on up.
Distinguished GMP faculty, staff, friends, and loved ones, welcome. Our last case study. I hope you've lived it in detail because there will be some cold calling. Now, who wants to open? Sunil. In our eyes, why don't you start us off? Tell us what this case is about.
Well, I think it's very interesting. I think it's about GMP.
Very astute, Sunil. He said it's about GMP. That's why they paid the big bucks. So what I'm hearing you say is that this is about three things. It's about a G, gratitude, or who can we be thankful to? You're saying it's about an M, or meaning. What have we learned? And it's about P, power, or how can the choices we make today profoundly change our narrative moving forward? So let's go with these three. Let's go with Sunil's three and start with gratitude. I have the honor of thanking, on behalf of GMP 25, from around the world, thanking several different people by saying, muchísimas gracias, to our families and friends. Please stand up. If you're a family or a friend, please stand up. You guys have great. The opportunity to attend GMP and to return truly grateful to you for how you inspire the best in us. You are our negative betas, and we promise that we'll start to help you with the work that we've neglected as soon as we finish, all the books that we've been given. Merci beaucoup to Harvard Business School and Generous Manufacturers for having provided the means for some of us to attend who otherwise would never have had this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Dhanyavad and grazie mille to our staff and housekeeping, the Chow Servery, Jesus, Tina, Thomke, and most importantly, our incredible GMP staff, Ani, Jen, Cassandra, Ashley, and Greg. For having kept us on track, for being so gracious with your time and your heartfelt openness and entertaining our zany extracurricular ideas, and to Greg from the very beginning who brought us together. Ani, if he's not on the payroll, he should be. And last but most certainly not least, to our coaches, guest speakers, and most importantly, our professors. Guru Mahagut, Dankube, vielen Dank, Tabaraba, Do Moegato, and Shukran Jazilan. Sunil, terima kasih for being our leader and Sherpa as we scaled new heights personally and professionally. You taught us about the profound lessons of digital transformation and forever changed our perception of razors and blades. And for the record, yes, data is the answer to everything. Kamsahamnida, Linda, for leading us in our exploration of the head, the heart, and the hand, and showing us that collective genius is as much about who we are as it is about what we do. You are the positive deviant that we aspire to emulate. Rawi, spasiba огромное, for edifying us with your global approach to the body politic and the economic ramifications of that for our businesses and countries. Thank you as well for your impeccable style and your suspenders. We look forward. Obrigado to Andy for instructing us about the alphabet soup of negotiation terms, tactics and tit-for-tat strategies using Zopa's fatness and reservation values. And God, it was so cool to wear those Super Bowl rings. Nandi to Viji for guiding our intellectual assets to the numeric and ethical liabilities of accounting and helping us to retain a learned equity, all the while proving to us that everything in life goes back to the accounting equation, including your dancing, Viji. That is fantastic. To David, for having demonstrated the value proposition and teaching strategy with a clear vision, mission, and values as we debated gargantuan valuations and changing industry structures. All the while drilling into us that everyone and their mother wants to avoid a 5-star crappy. Mulțumesc to me here for enlightening us to the wisdom of finance by rendering the complex so outstandingly simple and simply astounding. As well for helping us to reimagine our weekends with our loved ones, pouring over balance sheets, earning calls, and blah, blah, blah. Un día buena, Stefan. For inspiring us to search for innovation ties in through the eclectic mix of diverse companies and play. Your infectious enthusiasm is absolutely unforgettable. And you prove to us that teaching can be a form of exercise. On a personal note, Yekonya Mamnoon to my wife Sarah, my little Kuchu Aya, my mom, my dad, and my sister, for giving me the permission to join you, and especially to Sarah for her unwavering support. Lastly, 非常非常感谢 to each other for taking that which is different between us, despite our disagreements or different points of view, opening your hearts and minds to who we are and who we wish to become, for being vulnerable, supportive, a shoulder to cry on, and a reason to celebrate. Now, it's this final group that opens the door to our exploration of meaning. It's the interaction between us that lies at the heart of GMP. And to explore that, let me share with you a thought on meaning and what we've learned by way of 5 important GMP 25 facts. Number of cases and articles read, over 120 across 2,500 pages. Number of hours spent formally in class in case studies, over 200 hours. Number of pictures and videos taken, over 5,127. Number of bottles of liquid consumed, over 7 weeks. Yes, Dimitri?
We do not collect compromise.
Yes, except for easy dancing, that is true. NPV of new concepts learned and confidence gained. Yes, Kuma.
Priceless, but for everything else, there's master pack.
successive weeks of schooling in our lives, we emerge enlightened with priceless jargon from GMP. When life cold calls us and we don't know what to say, we'll remember, I can handle this. I can say something smart because I'm GMP. I'm a case-based change agent. My party map highlights a performance gap. I track in an activity map because I'm long boom, short bus. I A/B test my investment trust. I'm a competitively positioned, operationally effective, value-creating activity system. I know a TPS from a DBS and ROE from an ROA, and I have a whack baton through my razor blade. I think 5 courses, 4 Ps, 3 Cs, 2 classes, and a single vision. I'm creatively bottom-up, agile, top-down, resolute, and 360-degree abrasive. Because I recognize the brain drain, build a brain chain, and recruit for a brain gain, fueling an unidentified industry, omni-channel growth opportunity. Telling friends I'm collectively genius, yet singularly self-aware. The tact of my Kaizen fuels my core competence. I fail forward through disciplined experiments. I join the double wallet earnings call, preaching the wisdom of finance to all, and that's when I realize there's nothing to fear, you see, because believe you me, I'm a GMP. Now, I am a GMP. That's not to say that going through the program defines us, but rather that this experience, the people we meet, and what we've learned becomes, in retrospect, a part of our narrative. And whether this is the beginning of the end, or the end of the beginning, it's a choice. I'd like to share with you, on the topic of choice, a story about a mother and her little boy in a time of war. Picture her pregnant, 8 months old, praying that the roar of the war outside won't affect her unborn child. Soon after this little boy is born, she realizes that he has difficulty speaking. He's practically mute. One night, she sees the terror in his eyes as the sounds around him drown out her voice. The crescendo of the shrieking air raid siren, the panicked breaths, the screams, the feeling of being hurriedly carried, lowered underground, and the thunderous rumble that shook him inside. Over time, she tries everything she can, despite the limitations of her circumstances, to make him speak. Months pass and he still cannot speak. He's still mute. Until one day, something changes. You know why that little boy couldn't speak? His real difficulties were not ultimately his physical limitations, but rather the story that he told himself. It was that the outside world was too chaotic, and it was best to stay silent. That was his choice. When he finally began to make an effort to speak up, to stammer, and to stutter his way through the words, he realized the power of those words. That little boy is able to stand in front of you today because he chose not to stay silent. Now, we each have a profound personal narrative, stories of challenges we faced and how we overcame them. Empowered now with our newfound knowledge and connections, we have an even greater ability to succeed. But I would want to leave you with the thought that we now also have an opportunity to reflect on our narratives, on the stories that we tell ourselves about why we do what we do. We have a chance to look back and ask ourselves, what am I still excited about? I don't only mean this in the sense of that business is a tremendous force to improve the world and can enable us to speak out and make a difference. I also mean this in the sense that we are each at a crossroads, a time when we can reflect on that child within us, that voice inside of us that moves us towards a more compelling future. If you want to find that voice, do the rocking chair test. Imagine you're 100 years old, you're rocking back and forth on your rocking chair.
No teeth, but you're smiling. What are you smiling about? Is what you're doing now a reason to smile? If it is, great. Continue. Use the GMP learnings to accelerate that. If it isn't, ask yourself how you can take this opportunity and make it a reason to give your future self that toothless smile. And if you're afraid to fail, remember, success is not final, failure is not fatal. It's the courage to continue that counts. We are each a pillar of courage for each other. And I can't wait to see how we'll use this power to serve a greater purpose and to help others do the same, to not stay silent. Thank you, and class dismissed.
I wanted to invite Rawi to say a couple of words. So Rawi, and then Stefan Thomke, and then we'll talk to Rawi. You can just share a few words. Hard to follow Ali, but we're confident. You can. Okay, all right.
So one thing I would like to say is I've come to a number of these GMP closing events and heard a number of speeches by people who have been nominated by their classmates. And I was thinking as I was listening to Ali speak, this is definitely the best one of those. But then I realized I wasn't quite mistaken. This is just one of the best speeches that I've ever heard. Honestly, that was amazing. Like, genuinely amazing. And I don't feel pressure about following up on it. But I am in awe. It was really beautiful and touching and warm and from the heart and thoughtful and connective and sympathetic about all of the experiences that you've had here. So this is just really fantastic. So on behalf of I guess just me. Thank you. So, and I've taken up all of my words already, so let me just say a few other things. Also from the heart. One of the conversations that I've had over the years teaching GMP, it's been some years, has been about why I like teaching in this program. And why I think this program is meaningful to me. And I've always thought that the program could be marketed in a different way to express what is beautiful and unique about it. And I am not a marketing professor, as all of you know, and so I've struggled with that. And so sometimes people ask me, why do you like teaching this program? And the answer that I give, which I mean, actually genuinely, is what I like about teaching in this program is that the people whom I teach are like me, which is that they have a chip on their shoulder. Which doesn't sound very good, actually. And so then sometimes I get probed about that. And I say, no, what I mean is, these are people who are not done. These are people who have something to prove. these are people who are preparing for the next phase of their professional lives, the second half of their story. And this is a moment when they're reflecting about what they want to do and how they want to contribute. And so the chip on your shoulder that you've got something to prove, which is how I feel too. I think it feels deeply right and meaningful. That it's not that you're looking back on a career, celebrating it with yourself or with people who know you. It's that you've got more big things to do. And I love that about this group. That's what it feels like to me. Like, we're not done. We're not celebrating ourselves. We're getting ready for the next thing. So I will indulge myself very briefly, with apologies about taking a little bit of extra time, but I had to celebrate Holly, which I think is right. So I want to tell you very, very briefly about a book that changed my life. It was a book written by Albert Camus. It's called The Myth of Sisyphus. And in it has an essay called The Myth of Sisyphus, in which he reinterprets this classic Greek myth. The myth is probably familiar to almost all of us, this iconic punishment delivered by the gods to Sisyphus, in which he is supposed to roll a boulder up a hill every day. Every day he's supposed to roll it over the top, and every day he fails and it rolls back down. And starts again the next day. And this is imagined to be the worst possible punishment because it feels utterly futile to undertake this activity. And Camus, I think, teaches us that it's not. And he goes through this long existentialist essay to deliver a conclusion at the end that I think is exactly right, about the beauty of finding something that is meaningful and yet possibly impossible to do, but it is worth trying, a struggle that is worth the effort. So, if I may, just deliver a little bit of it. It is in during that return, that pause that Sisyphus interests me. If the descent is thus sometimes performed in sorrow, it can also take place in joy. And then finally, I leave Sisyphus at the foot of the mountain. One always finds one's burden again. But Sisyphus teaches the higher fidelity that negates the gods, raises rocks. He too concludes that all is well. The universe henceforth without a master seems to him neither sterile nor futile. Each atom of that stone, each mineral flake of that night-filled mountain in itself forms a world. The struggle toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus happy because he has something worth trying to do. And the feeling that I get from rereading Camus on this point is the feeling that I get when I spend time with all of you, which is that one is never done. One never looks back in the past tense and says, I did this thing and now it is done. That's an utter myth of how our careers might work, that we'll be one day totally self-satisfied and congratulate ourselves on a career that is now done. The beauty of what we do here with you all at this stage of your lives is that it is all about living in the present progressive, not in the past tense. Always in the process of becoming, and only ever in the process of becoming. And I am always, but especially this year, and perhaps even especially because of how Ali brought us together at this point, just so proud to be part of this moment in your lives, this always becoming, always learning, one is never done. So it is a real honor to be part of that moment in your lives, and I'm grateful for it. So thank you, all of you.
And up next, David Collis. Yeah.
I have two things to say. First, and the most important is congratulations to you. Congratulations. The second thing is to do something I didn't do in class, which is to tell a joke. I don't know many jokes, but this one is appropriate. And it's about a professor, strangely enough. He's a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, and he comes back to the US, and he goes on a speaking tour, 40 days around the US. The only thing is that he doesn't like flying. So what he does is he arranges a chauffeur who's going to drive in between all these various speaking engagements. And he does the first one, he does the second one, he does the 27th one, he does the 28th one, he does the 34th one. And they're driving to the 37th one. And the chauffeur is driving him and he's saying, looking in the, and he says to the physicist, "You don't really want to do this talk, do you?" The physicist says, "Well, I have done it 36 times and it's pretty boring." And the chauffeur says, "Look, you do it with PowerPoint slides. And I've seen you do it 36 times. Let me give it for you." And, they argue back and forth. And finally they convinces the physicist, so they sort of change clothes. And the chauffeur goes up, and, huge big town hall meeting. And, he delivers it, worded perfectly. The only thing is he was a little bit nervous, so he finishes 5 minutes early. So the host says, "Terrific, wonderful, thank you, round of applause." And then he says, "We have 5 minutes. Are there any questions?" And it turns out that the nemesis of the physicist is sitting in the front row, and he jumps up and he says, "Oh, if only you did the Taylor series expansion." And of course, the chauffeur has absolutely no intent. The chauffeur says, "Do you know what? That question is so stupid, I bet even my chauffeur can answer it." Not combined with any of the questions you asked anywhere. So, congratulations, well done. Thank you very much.
I said, I thought I was finished. So I have to be out there, and by the way, it's actually sort of very dangerous to ask a German to give a speech. Since David just told a joke, let me sort of tell you a little story here, and I don't know if you've heard this one. This is a story about an American, an Italian, and a German all get executed, sort of get sentenced to be executed. And they get one last wish. So they come up to the American and says, "You're going to go first." And the American says, "Oh, wonderful. I do have one last wish. I'd like to get 5 Big Macs. I'd like to get a gallon of Coca-Cola. And once I take that in, I'm a happy man and I'm ready to go." Then they go to the German and saying, "Well, you're going to be next, so what is your wish?" They said, "Well, as a German, I'd like to give one last speech. I'd like to tell a story about the history of my country, about its literature, about its music, about poetry, about whatever kind of comes to mind." And then they finally go to the Italian and ask, "And what would you like as your last wish?" He said, "My last wish is, please shoot me before the German begins his speech." I will be very brief. So, I started out in GMP with GMP 11. So I've sort of been there for a long time. And last year, I did sort of something that, doesn't really exist in the business world. I took a sabbatical. So I didn't teach GMP 23 and 24. For those of you who don't know what a sabbatical is, the concept of sabbatical is basically so that you don't have to wake up in the morning. You sit there in deep thought all day. You don't have to shave for days. You basically don't know your family. And hopefully along the way, you actually produce very stimulating work. And I did that for about a year. And, one thing I noticed, my wife told me, I said, at some point, maybe it's time for you to go back and teach. And I also realized that I was a bit GMP. So GMP 25 is something really special for me. It's like starting all over. It's like falling in love again. You know, so. And by the way, you know, in the sabbatical, I also gained about 6 or 7 pounds, which I shedded very easily to this route. So I got back on my exercise for the cycle as well. Now, I do want to give you sort of one last piece of advice. And now you've received a lot of advice, you know, in the last few days, you know, from professors, from fellow participants, from family members, and so on. And I don't really want to pile on very much. But I want to give you some advice that I actually got from a magician. Now, that would not be me. I'm talking about a real magician, not someone who's just fakes to be a fake magician. And that was actually a piece of advice that I got from a very close friend of mine. His name is Jason Randall. I've been working with him for about 10 years. We've become very close friends. And he's a world-class magician. He's been performing for more than 40 years, entertained 7 US presidents, and has been around the world and so forth. He's a spectacular guy. And we had this conversation. And I wanted to kind of understand how he actually designs his magic performances. So I asked as a Jason, sort of, when you sort of think about magic, sort of, what do you actually do? Sort of, how do you actually do this? Because I see people completely blown away by what you do. And so he asked me, just like in good case teaching fashion, he asked me, what do you think I do? So I said, well, I watch you and you're doing card tricks, coin tricks, rope tricks, you're doing all these kinds of tricks, and that's what really makes me great. He said, no, that's actually not what I'm doing, that's not what I'm aiming for. I said, so what are you aiming for? He said, no. When I think about performance, I think about something that's very, very different. He said, I have one single objective. And the single objective is, I want to change the way people feel for the better. I said, wow, that's interesting. He said, yeah, I want to give them sort of a moment, sort of in their busy lives, they come there, I want them to turn them into children again, I want them sort of to awaken their curiosity, I want them to walk out of there and I want them to feel very differently. And when I think about sort of this objective, when he sort of designs these things, you know, it really opened up all possibilities because he said, for me, magic is just a modality. There are actually many ways to change the way people feel for the better. And I really took that to heart. Because I started to think about teaching actually the way as well. Yes, we educate, we sort of do these things, but at some level, one of the objectives is also to teach, sort of to change the way you feel about yourself, about others, about the world. And I want to maybe leave this with you as a piece of advice as you go out and go back into your companies, when you talk to your customers. Whatever you do is maybe to think about what you do is more broadly when you interact with people. Maybe your objective should be sort of to change the way people feel as well for the better, because if you think about it sort of in a big picture, it opens up a lot of possibilities. So that's something I took sort of at heart, advice from a magician who's been sort of out there for many, many years. I think it's great advice. It really changed the way sort of I think about it. Hopefully, maybe it's something that you sort of take to heart and really changes the way you approach it as well. So thank you very much. It's been great to be part of
I just got a call from Justin Trudeau. I think he resigned because he heard my speech and he said that's it. So, money for Prime Minister. Yeah. After the speech, I think you're good enough for me. I just want this moment to again thank all of you and your families, and also thank my colleagues from both the GMP faculty and the staff. And may I ask all of them to come here so you can take one final picture if you want.
Ali, we're going to take a picture with yes.
Come on, Ravi.
And we need Linda.
Yeah.
Yes, we'll get it. On the side, stand right in front.
Everybody fall out.
All right. Yeah. Go up. Two more. We might have to double row. There you go. The patrol. Couple of ladies outside. I'll do Ali's job. All right.
Okay, guys, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Enjoy